Hello there, good afternoon and welcome to the Weather Studio Live. It's March, Tuesday the 5th of March actually. It's my wedding anniversary today.
Congratulations. Yeah. And you're choosing it to spend with me.
You, yes. 1 p.m. and yes, as usual we're here to talk about weather. What we've got coming up, Aidan?
Coming up, a devastating tornado in Alabama kills 23 people. We'll be looking at why. You're coming back on my laptop, you're replaying.
Can't get enough of me,
Switch
Aidan,
that off.
Can you? You really can't.
Double Clare.
So we're talking about tornadoes. Devastating things happened over in Alabama at the end of the weekend. We're also talking about International Women's Day. We're marking it. It's actually on Friday, 8th of March. But we're talking about the top 3 women who had a real impact, contributed significantly to the world of weather over the last 150 years. So we've got a great guest talking about that.
And after the extraordinary warmth of February, are we back to business as usual as we go through March? We'll be taking a look at the forecast and we'll be looking back at what a remarkable month, particularly the end of the month last week.
So get in touch. Obviously, we really want to hear your comments and your questions. Also, we have been developing some new graphics, some new tones to the rainfall, the sea, the cloud, and you'll be seeing these on the screen through the show. So let us know your thoughts, whether you like them or not. Obviously, Aidan was quite involved in that, so be kind. We did have a question from last week, actually, which I think you'd like to answer before we get going on today's show. Yeah, William Grimsley, last week, you remember, he was talking about airflow and how when it comes up from the south, it's fairly humid. But some areas have had very, very dry weather, dry, low humidity air. I was wondering how this is so.
Well, the airflow did originate, the very warm air that we had at the end of February, that, if you trace it back, came from around the Azores, which, when you normally get air from that direction, it is quite humid. However, the air came from not only the Azores, but right at the top of the atmosphere. And if you follow the trajectories back just a few days, that air came from where the jet stream normally sits, where the aeroplanes normally fly, right at the top of the troposphere, the tropopause. And it not only travelled north towards the UK, but it descended as well. And when air falls out of the sky, when it descends, it tends to dry out because it warms up, and warmer air can hold more moisture, so the moisture that's available in that air then gets more evenly spread. So that air rapidly descended from really high in the sky as it headed towards the UK, and it dried out, and that's why we had the cloud-free skies at the end of February, and why we were able to get so much sunshine that then helped to dry out the ground, another factor in terms of how dry it was, and warm up those temperatures.
It's an interesting mechanism there. It's the mechanism of compression, and we see it when moist air blows over a mountainside. When it descends over the other side, you tend to get warmer air, drier air, and hence sunnier skies. It's called the Föhn effect, and we see that a lot in Scotland, don't we? We see a prevailing wind coming in from the southwest. So a similar mechanism.
A bigger scale. And if you want to Google it, the technical term is adiabatic warming. As that air falls through the sky, then it warms up adiabatically. So that's Google that if you want to find out more.
Yeah.
But yeah, on the other side of the world, at the weekend, devastating tornado.
It's been pretty horrific for the people of Lee County in Alabama. Last Sunday, it happened through the afternoon. It was an active cold front which pushed from the west towards the east. Alabama is one of the states, it's sort of mid-east really. It's inland from the Californias, northwest of Florida. But if you saw something like this coming towards you, I guarantee you would be very, very scared. And people feared for their lives across the county of Lee. And you can see here,
take a look at this.
This is a supercell here.
There's a few flashes because the tornado was taking out some of these power lines. You can see this will be on a loop, so you'll see that again.
This huge cell of cumulonimbus clouds, obviously massive anvils, a lot of rotation within that cloud, allowing secondary vortexes to form in the form of tornadoes. Now, some very interesting aspects to what happened here in Alabama, but sadly, the consequences were devastating. 23 people lost their lives last Sunday in Alabama. However, this is the first time more than 23 people have died through a tornado outbreak in 6 years. So it is very rare. If we look at the radar, we can see the cold front pushing through a very active system. And you can just see here, this is the tornado here, which is developing and creating some sort of rotation as it pushes from the west towards the east. And anything in its path is going to be devastated. So initially, people thought, yes, this is probably going to be an EF3, that's the tornado level, a mid sort of quite a deadly beast, but not as bad as a 4. But looking at all the destruction, looking at what happened in the wake of this tornado, they've actually upgraded it now to an EF4. Sustained winds of 170 miles an hour. I don't think we've ever seen winds that strong here in the UK. Certainly sustains winds.
And compared to last year's tornado season, only 10 people died last year, thankfully, right, which is relatively low, isn't it?
It is relatively low. It was a fairly quiet tornado season last year. So it's been about 6 years since we've seen such a horrific consequence to a tornado spawn. However, the interesting thing about this situation is, first of all, it happened away from Tornado Alley. So this is Alabama here. And this is what we call Tornado Alley. That's where most of the tornadoes tend to break out. And the reason why, it's a combination of the cold air flowing across the Rockies, warm air wafting up from the south. And it's a perfect storm for the clash of that cold and that moist warm air, which creates these huge clouds and creates enough energy in the atmosphere to form tornadoes. So that's the first thing. The geography was really out, although we can see tornadoes pretty much anywhere across the US, but they tend to be concentrated in this area. The other aspect of it was, it's only March, it's March the 1st, and most tornadoes in the US tend to develop from about mid-spring through into the summer. That's when you get the real extremes in temperature between the north air mass and the southern air mass. So this was very unusual. And this cold front eventually did clear towards the east. But as I said, you know, it's going to be etched on many people's memories for many generations to come. And it does have consequences elsewhere as well, implications for our weather across the UK.
Yeah, because the cold front responsible for that tornado, let's just put on the isobars in the chart there. You can see that cold front there well into the Atlantic by Tuesday afternoon. This is Tuesday afternoon. And following that cold front, a cold plunge, this blue air coming south across much of the US. Now, why does that matter for our weather? Very cold air across North America, but that often, and in this case especially, that often comes into contact with the Atlantic, mild Atlantic waters, and that temperature contrast fuels a powerful jet stream, which we are now seeing. And the jet stream, of course, this fast-flowing current of air high in the sky over the Atlantic, 30,000 feet high. Well, it helps to allow planes to make a faster crossing of the Atlantic, but it also acts as a breeding ground for low-pressure systems, and that's what we're seeing. These low-pressure systems, a few of them forming out in the Atlantic, hence the unsettled weather at the moment. So often when you get cold air spilling out of North America, you get a more energised jet stream, and we get more unsettled weather as a result. And that's what we're seeing for the foreseeable future.
And for the UK, the jet stream really is just blowing across our path. We are in the firing line for those stronger winds, and also for the low pressure systems at ground level to track across us. And in fact, that's what we're likely to see for the next few days. We saw it in terms of Storm Freya a few days ago. Strong winds, maximum wind I think was 77 miles an hour, some heavy rain, and also some snow associated with that as well, because this time of year it doesn't take much for that cold air to undercut. And we are likely to see another wet and windy system coming in midweek. Yeah,
that's right. And just putting on the temperature colours there, you can see how the jet stream does tend to divide the cold air to the north of it with the milder air to the south. And we're often on the cold side of the jet stream over the next few days, so hill snow certainly a possibility as these low pressure systems run in. Nothing at all unusual about that for the time of year, of course.
Now, Andrew Baldock and Victoria Waller and others actually are asking, is there any more stormy weather on the way? And Aidan will give us a bit more information about that in a few minutes' time. Because actually, the weather is looking quite lively, isn't it?
It is over the next week or so, and there's lots going on, wind and rain. It's in a boisterous mood. Another
question actually coming in from YouTube, Chris A, and he asks, what causes rainfall clouds to dissipate or even materialise on a radar? So that's quite interesting, and you know, there's a lot of science behind cloud and cloud structure and how they form. And obviously it's about air rising, being buoyant and rising into cooler air, which allows the air water vapor to condense into little cloud droplets, which eventually get heavier and heavier. And through the process of coalescence, we see these raindrops get bigger and bigger, and eventually gravity wins and they fall through the sky to Earth. And that's when it eventually dries up, and that's when we eventually see those clouds dissipate. And it all gets picked up on the radar, which is a very scientific mechanism. Maybe you can tell us more about that than what I know. But all I know is there's lots of lovely colours which tell us where the rain is and how heavy it's going to be.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of reasons for the rain clouds to dissipate or to form that you see on the radar. There are also all sorts of difficulties with radar imagery. It's not perfect.
No.
Sometimes it doesn't pick up the drizzly kind of rain that you see often in our country, especially over the hills. And sometimes it overplays rainfall. If it's snowing, then it will overplay it. Or if the rain clouds are just on the edge of that radar beam, then it can be difficult to interpret. So there's all sorts of challenges with radar. We use it in conjunction with lots of other things like satellite imagery and computer models and so on.
Actually, there's a really interesting Learn About Weather item on our YouTube channel about clouds and how it rains. Really interesting, so you can log on to that. And there's lots more information there.
We should put one on there about radar.
We should, actually. That's a good point. Thanks for that.
Good idea.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's move on. We are marking International Women's Day this week, aren't we, Aidan?
That's right. Yeah, this Friday, International Women's Day. And we've got a very special guest now, Dr. Catherine Ross. She's been a star of the Weather Studio before, and we're, well, happy to welcome her back. Come and join us, Catherine.
So we asked Catherine to give us your top 3 top women in weather, probably from about 150 years ago and sort of up towards the sort of present time. So shall we start with an interesting woman called Eunice Foote?
Yep, great name, isn't it?
Yes, it really is, yes. So who is she? Where'd she come from, and why is she significant in the weather world?
Yeah, why did I pick Eunice Foote?
Yes.
So Eunice Foote was an American lady. She was born in 1819, died in 1888, and she was a very early climatologist. So she carried out work on carbon dioxide and essentially discovered the concept of the greenhouse effect.
Which is incredible, because it's something we've been talking about for the last, say, 30 years, and it's been very much popular science, but before that, it wasn't really in any meteorological textbooks as such, was it? It was something for the sort of high-end scientists. But back to 100 or so years ago, it's amazing that she was able to understand this concept and how relevant perhaps it was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, John Tyndall, the Irish scientist, is sort of better known for his work on CO2, but actually Eunice Foote was doing her work 3 years before him, and she produced a very well-known paper for its time in 1856 about the warming effect of the sun's rays and how CO2 would sort of impact on that. But actually, sort of fitting in with the fact that we're talking 1856, she wasn't actually allowed to present her own paper at the 8th American Association for the Advancement of Science Congress.
Because she was a woman.
Because she was a woman, exactly. That's the only reason why. It had to be presented by a man, by Dr. Joseph Henry.
That's really shocking.
Yeah, it is. But it's more amazing that she was able to study meteorology and science in the first place. You know, yes, you know, kids went to school, but for girls it was all about sewing, it was about domestic science, and then it was all about getting married. You know, that was really where society was at that stage.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and you especially find that with our second lady, Eleanor Ormerod.
Got a photo of her there.
Yeah, wonderful photo of Eleanor Ormerod. She's a fantastic character. And so she was slightly later, 1828 to 1901, but not much in it really.
True Brit, this one.
True Brit, yeah, absolutely. And you know, what makes her interesting, I mean, she studied French and English and all the things that ladies were supposed to study, but no background in maths. She wasn't taught any maths or science because that was for the boys. And yet she went on to become a leading entomologist and in the end very, very involved in sort of analysis of weather statistics. And this is actually her with her own weather station in Isleworth near London, and she'd have been feeding results from that back to the Met Office that will still be used in the models today.
So her data back in the day is still used in climate models today. And in a minute we'll be talking about February stats and the reason why we can really analyse what's happening now relative to the background of information is because of people like her, the network of observers out there who give us daily records of different weather elements such as wind, rain,
pressure.
Temperature. Exactly. So this woman, it was basically, she was ahead of her game as well.
Oh, very much so, yeah. I mean, she was actually awarded an LLD, Doctor of Laws, by Edinburgh University, an honorary LLD, I should say. And she was the first lady to be given one of those, so it's quite an achievement. She was also given the Flora Award by the Royal Horticultural Society. She was appointed consulting entomologist by the Royal Agricultural Society. Now, that's pretty good going for that period.
So a real independent and scientific mind.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we're flying the flag for Eleanor today, Eleanor Ormerod. And the final one in your top 3 is this woman here. So we're fast forwarding now into the 20th century.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who's this woman?
This is Joanne Simpson, and this is an amazing lady. She's an American scientist, and she was the very first lady to have a PhD in meteorology.
Ooh, wow.
And her work was about clouds, linking in actually with the question that you had just earlier. So she was trying to understand how clouds formed, and particularly she worked on hot tower clouds and tropical clouds. And she was also a trained pilot, and she trained American US Air Force pilots during the Second World War as well.
So she taught them meteorology?
She taught them meteorology, yeah.
And also she's quite controversial in some respects, isn't she? Because she was director of something called Project Storm Fury.
Yes, she was. So she worked for NASA just prior to that, working on tropical rainfall again. And then she went on to Project Storm Fury, which is essentially they were trying to manipulate hurricanes to try and lessen their impact.
So it's a geoengineering project, which I sense failed abysmally.
Yes, it wasn't the most successful project in the world, but some of the results that came out of that did certainly help to understand hurricanes a great deal more. So it was useful in its own way.
So she was, again, somebody who contributed significantly to meteorology.
Absolutely.
And a great inspiration for budding meteorologists of generations after her.
Yeah, I mean, the first woman with a PhD in meteorology. You can only go up from there, can't you?
Go, Joanne.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Given how few the opportunities were, there seems to have been a remarkable contribution from these 3 ladies.
Yeah, I mean, early on, there's sort of limited numbers of ladies who are getting these opportunities. Yeah, they've got to have understanding family, understanding husbands. But yeah, what they do get involved in, they're really the big guns in that field.
Yeah.
And of course, we limited you to 3 women. If you had 4, you'd have chosen Clare and Aidan.
Oh, of course.
So.
Good at pointing. Catherine, thank you so much for coming back on. Catherine is one of the panellists on the Mostly Weather podcast, and the latest episode is out, and that's actually talks about severe weather and the impacts of severe weather, and so you'll hear her. You've just done one on the Mostly Weather Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I have.
Which was a man, Elif Richardson, but
a really important man. We've got to include him.
So check out our podcast. There's lots of great programmes on there as well. Catherine, thank you so much. We'll see you again.
Thank you.
Cheers.
We've had a few questions in, Claire. On Facebook, Nicholas Chamberlain, given that we were talking about tornadoes, he's asked how many tornadoes does the UK see?
That's an interesting question. We see on average around 30 to 33 tornadoes per year, and in fact, joint with Holland, we see more per square mile than any other country in the world. They're obviously not as potent, but because we're an island, because we're smaller, that sort of concentrates them in a smaller area. And
those are just the observed tornadoes.
Yes, that's right.
A lot of them might go unreported.
Yeah, and in fact, today more so than ever, we do take more photographs. We've got our cameras on our phones. And there's Toro. Check out the Toro website because they give really good indications whether some days are more likely to see a tornado or not. But we don't tend to get those really big, devastating ones, those supercells. Which
not often, but we can get damaging tornadoes. For example, in 2005, there was a famous one that hit Birmingham. That left a trail of destruction.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so they can be dangerous in this country. They're just not normally as big as the US. And another question here, Danny Fulham on YouTube. Is that cold plunge in the US going to make its way eastwards to the UK? Well, the short answer to that is no, because, of course, any cold weather over the US, it would have to move across the Atlantic, which would warm it up. as I was explaining, the main impact of cold plunges over the US very often is that when they come out and meet that Atlantic Ocean, they tend to fuel a more powerful jet stream. So very often when you see cold weather on the other side of the pond, it means wet weather for us rather than
However, that wasn't the case last month, was it? I mean, this time last week we were talking record-breaking temperatures and we're waiting for that number to appear on our charts saying, yes, that was the warmest winter day on record. In fact, it happened just after the show, didn't it?
It did, yeah. We got above 21 degrees last Tuesday in London, and to think that on Monday it was the first day we'd ever got above 20 degrees in the winter in the UK. On Tuesday we got above 21 degrees to make it again the warmest winter day on record. So an extraordinary end to February, quite a remarkable month, given that we started off February, if you can remember, with snow.
Yes. And
Parts of Hampshire had 19
right.
centimetres of snow on the 1st of February.
So what happened, Aidan?
Well, that cold air didn't last long. Virtually every other day after the first couple of days in February was above average, and that temperature kept rising throughout February. And this map will show you now the average temperature for February 2019. And you can see the red colours, mostly above 2.5 degrees above normal. So this is the temperature anomaly. Most of the country, 2.5 degrees above normal. Some places, 3.5 degrees above normal for the average temperature.
I don't think I've ever seen a map in February which has so many reds on it.
Well, you're about to see an even redder one.
Really? My goodness, let's check it out. Let's have a look.
All right, so for the average temperature this February, it was the second warmest February on record. Okay. So that's the daytime and nighttime temperatures combined. This is just the daytime temperature, so the maximum temperature this February, virtually the whole of the country, 3.5 degrees above the average. And it was the warmest February on record for the maximum temperature, so for the daytime highs. So, yeah, second warmest overall, warmest for the maximum temperature, and also the second sunniest on record. Yeah. So remember, all that sunshine in the last week or so helped contribute towards it being an extraordinarily sunny month as well. How does that fit into the overall winter statistics? Well, just quickly, you'll see another map here that's mostly red. This is the overall winter temperature, and you can see that was way above average for winter. So winter overall was a mild season, and it was also a dry season. You don't often get mild and dry winters, because normally when it's mild, it's because you've got a lot of wind and rain from the Atlantic. When it's cold, it's often drier. But yeah,
I've noticed on all of these maps, though, we're almost off the scale with their anomalies. So, you know, the driest, the sunniest, the warmest. Where do we go with the colour scale? We're going to have to change them, aren't we?
Speak to Dr. Mark McCarthy, who's a regular guest on this show, see if he's got any new
Now,
colour
Caleb
scales.
Randall is saying, how stormy is it going to be this weekend?
Well, let's take a look.
Let's take a look,
because there's some uncertainty about this weekend, about just how stormy it might get. Now, this is the globe, obviously, Tuesday. Clock running forward there. I mentioned the active jet stream. There it is, coming out of the Atlantic, this powerful jet stream. Put a low pressure system on there. Wednesday, it's a wet day. It's a wet night tonight. There are rain warnings in force for South Wales, Southwest England. Just pause it there. So tonight, Tuesday night, wet night for the Southwest in particular. Rain crossing most of the country apart from the north of Scotland. And then that area of low pressure still with us on Wednesday into Wednesday night. And you can see there, it's just moving slowly into the North Sea. So really, it's just an unsettled spell of weather over the next few days. And you can see just areas of rain moving across the country through Wednesday into Wednesday night. Showery, increasingly showery, and increasingly strong wind as well. And that rain turning to snow for the higher ground north of Snowdonia. Now, running that forward, that low pressure gradually moves out of the way. So it does improve on Thursday, slowly. A lot of cloud cover, a lot of blustery winds, pausing it there at that point. And Friday starts off fine, but the next area of low pressure soon moving in. So it's going to be a mishmash of lots of different kinds of weather over the next few days.
Frosty maybe Friday morning.
Yeah, it could be under that just brief ridge of high pressure.
But takes.
We've got this jet stream which is just continuing to bring areas of low pressure our way, keeping the weather chopping and changing over the next few days. Now, that jet stream is worth paying attention to by this stage. As we head through Friday, it's going to push this area of low pressure towards us. It's going to bring these weather fronts in, so more wet and windy weather through Friday night and into the start of the weekend. But let's pause it there, because here, doesn't look like much at this stage. As we start off Saturday, there's a developing area of low pressure, and that is something that at the moment it's causing us a bit of a headache in terms of forecasting how it will develop into the weekend, because how it interacts with the jet stream is crucial in terms of how deep it will get. Now, I've got two computer model projections here. There's the UK Met Office model here, there's a European model here, and what this shows, on the left here, this is midday on Saturday, on the right here is midday Sunday. This is the jet stream, and this, so the colours of the jet stream, the darker the colours, the stronger the jet stream. So this is the core of the jet stream here, and this is that area of low pressure midday Saturday. And this is the same area of low pressure midday Saturday on different model projections. So both of them show that area of low pressure sitting under the core of the jet stream. Very strong winds right up there at 20, 25, 30,000 feet in the sky. Now, depending on exactly where that low pressure sits in relation to the jet stream will make a big difference in terms of how much it deepens and where it goes by the time we get to midday Sunday. This is midday Sunday, and by this stage, the low pressure on the UK computer model is to the northwest of Scotland. We've got strong winds across many parts of the country. But on the European model there, it's across central parts of Britain and some very lively weather, some gales across southern parts of England and Wales. And you'll notice there, midday Saturday, so 24 hours earlier, there's barely any difference. The differences are only subtle, but they end up making a big impact in terms of how windy it will be and how widely those winds will be on Sunday. So that's definitely something we'll be keeping a close eye on here at the Met Office. We'll keep you updated over the next few days.
You're doing a 10-day trend tomorrow, so probably there'll be a bit more
clarity.
Yeah,
hopefully.
let's hope so. And obviously we'll keep you posted here on all our social media channels. Current weather on Twitter, obviously, some great stuff on Facebook, YouTube, as we've said, some good explainers on there. And actually, Alex does some great little films on Snapchat as well. He's trying to involve me in one of those the other day, and he put me as an angel. It's boys with toys, really, to be honest, but there was some meteorological detail in there somewhere.
I hope so.
Yes.
So you can find all that on our social media channels. But thank you for watching, and thank you for all of your interesting questions. It's been a pleasure answering them. That's all for now. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.